Hello. So today I had a 2.5 hour, nearly 3 hour meeting with the NDIS to help figure out my daughter's funding for the next 12 months. And it's been a lot of build up and a lot of stress heading into this week. And I think that it's worth talking about this for this month's video journal thing, because a lot of people in Australia don't actually know a lot about the NDIS, and neither does the rest of the world. And our current government have been trying to dismantle all of the amazing public health care supports in this country, like NDIS and Medicare and the amazing public hospitals. And I have heard people from time to time complain about why we need things like the NDIS. And it is a service that is really important to me. So here we go. I thought I'd talk a little bit about it this month. So NDIS stands for National Disability Insurance Scheme. And whenever I say it, I want to rub my hands together because the word scheme is amusing. But basically it's a public disability funding system. And it was set up under the Labour government of Julia Gillard, who was our first and only female Prime Minister, and I miss her every day. And it was set up to make life easier financially for people and families living with disabilities, and to make one government organisation that covers most of the stuff and to try and make things fair so that everyone has access to funding that they need. And it is slowly being rolled out across the country, and in our state it is accessible to children under 13 years old. So basically, before the NDIS, we relied on Medicare and public hospitals and charitable organisations. And we still rely on Medicare a great deal, and on public hospitals, and on charity. But now we also have the NDIS, and that makes our lives a little easier. It takes some of the stress off. And what we do each year is we meet with our caseworker and we talk through what services and equipment that we will need for the next 12 months. And this includes physiotherapy, occupational therapy, hydrotherapy, speech pathology, nutrition, psychology, respite care and assistive technology, and home modifications. My job as the primary carer is to put forth my argument as to why each of these things are necessary for my child, to gather reports from our therapists and doctors to support this, and to provide quotes for costing for all of those therapies and the equipment, and to hand it in to my caseworker. We have a big meeting where we discuss all of these things, and then they put this into a workable plan and figure it all, if it's all going to come in on budget, and then present it for approval. And this is a lot of work, and sometimes it can be rather complicated, but we've been in it since the system started. We were one of the test families because we wanted to be involved in it and we thought it was a good idea. So by now we are starting to figure out how to work through the system and get things done and speak the right language. My son's funding meeting is actually at the end of the month, so I get to do it all over again in a couple of weeks. But at least this year we have the same caseworker for both kids, so I can go in there and say, this is what we need, you already know our situation, I don't have to re-explain anything, which is really nice, because continuity of care isn't something you always get in the public health system for necessary reasons. but it is always nice when it works out that way. So before the NDIS, people relied on charitable organisations or private health insurance for a lot of services like physiotherapy and occupational therapy. Even with Medicare, which is a government-funded public health insurance, you still paid a gap fee, which, if you were having multiple therapies and pieces of equipment, can get expensive really fast. Now we have the NDIS, and it basically means that we don't have to worry about certain things like that. So our therapy still comes through a non-for-profit organisation. Now they just have the added bonus of they actually get paid a full, physiotherapist's wage by the government, which is really wonderful. It makes life better for them as well. They are working for a charitable organisation and they're actually getting a livable wage for all of those therapists. When the NDIS first rolled out, the big thing for us was that it meant that we suddenly didn't have to worry about raising the money for our daughter's power wheelchair. And those things can cost up to $40,000 because there isn't actually a manufacturer of paediatric powered wheelchairs in Australia. A lot of her parts either come from the United States or from Germany. And so just the importing and then altering can cost a lot of money. And the NDIS, the government, picked up the tab for that. I've cried multiple times about that. It was amazing, and it took a huge stress off of our family to know that we didn't have to raise any of that money, that the charities that were helping us out could actually put that money towards other things to help us as well, and that there was a government that actually cared enough about our situation to make that available. They also pay for her weekly therapy sessions, for her bed, which is a hospital grade bed, for her mattress, which is an airflow mattress that stops pressure sores, and for her supportive garments and orthotics. So she has a special skin suit that she wears which has boning put through it to stop her scoliosis, and ankle foot orthotics that stop her legs from becoming too contracted and from those joints from seizing up in awkward and uncomfortable positions. And quite honestly, I don't know what we would do without that. The NDIS does not cover hospital visits, her paediatrician, her pulmonary doctor, her rehab paediatrician, fracture clinic, spinal clinic, throat clinic, her multiple disciplinary team, which look at muscle weakness and a whole range of things for her. But those doctors work at our city's public hospital, main public children's hospital, and they send all of those costs through Medicare, and we don't have to pay for them. We pay for other things like the rental of all of her breathing equipment, her BiPAP machine, her cough machine, which we rent from the hospital, her feeding machine and the formula she has overnight. With that, we pay for the medications and the fluid thickeners and the purchase of a modified car, and to do most of our house modifications. Obviously, we pay for travel time and parking at the hospital and the therapy centre, and we are at both of these locations at least once a week, and the hospital is an hour away. The therapy centre is half an hour away, so it's plenty of driving and petrol and all, and parking and all of that, but all of that is fine. And so all of the NDIS stuff and the Medicare stuff and the public hospital stuff is funded by the government. which is funded by the taxpayers. And I know that I've talked to people in the United States and elsewhere in the world who seem to have been told that there are people who do not like Medicare and do not like universal health care. But overwhelmingly in Australia, Medicare is seen as a thing that people are more than happy to fund because most of us make use of it. And people who I've met who don't use Medicare because they're a couple, they're each on $100,000 a year, they are happy to forego their Medicare entitlements and use their private health insurance because they know they don't need to, and they're happy to take that strain off of the public system, and they are happy to help fund that. And that's amazing because overwhelmingly it is seen as a positive thing. Politicians will claim that people aren't happy with it. I've never actually met a person who didn't like Medicare and the fact that our public health system is subsidised. There is always an outrage when there is cuts to public hospitals, which there always are. Because those public health services are so necessary, and without them we would be in very dire straits. Oh look, that's my telephone. Our emergency rooms wouldn't cope. We wouldn't have access to healthcare and emergency healthcare the way that we do if it weren't for those public hospitals and public health systems. We have never left hospital with a bill for our stay. We have never been in debt to a hospital. We have never paid for the casting of a broken bone. And there's been quite a lot of those in our family. We have never paid for the procedures that our children and that we have undergone whilst in hospital, including but not limited to X-rays, MRIs, other bone scans, blood tests, various medical tests, and medications received in hospital. The affordability and ease with which we can access hospitals and therapies means that I am actually able to be part of the workforce more than I might otherwise be, and I have the money that means I can contribute as a taxpayer. If I was forced to work at lower pay in order to just make ends meet, which I have had to do in the past, then I would not be able to make enough money to pay tax. All of this sort of accumulates and means that better public health means people are able to work more and actually contribute more, which means for a healthier economy and a healthier society, in my opinion. I have on occasion heard people bitching and complaining about the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, because it is fairly new and because there was a lot of negative rhetoric around it. People have complained about needing an extra organisation giving out tax dollars for the disabled, as if people living with disabilities are a privileged group in our society. But my response when I hear people talk about that is always to say thank you. To thank them for their tax dollars that are spent on making the lives of my children a little bit more bearable. Your money might be going to the military or to offshore detention centres that violate UN guidelines about the treatment of refugees when it would be cheaper and better to house and process them here. Or your money might be going to expensive dinners and cars of our politicians. Or it might be going to us to ensure that my daughter can interact with the world and live beyond her prognosis, and that my son gets the therapeutic support that he needs in order to live in a world that is often too bright, too loud, and too overwhelming for him. I certainly know where I'm happy for money to be going to. At other times, I have heard it said that people who rely on the government are lazy. And dole bludgers gets thrown around a lot. But dealing with this stuff really is a full-time job. So for my daughter alone, who has spinal muscular atrophy, which is a degenerative condition, in the next month we will have weekly appointments with hydrotherapist, physiotherapist and occupational therapist, and 2 additional appointments with specialist physiotherapists who are adjusting her wheelchair, because she's starting to grow out of the seat and she needs a new control stick, and she needs additional neck support and head support now that those muscles have weakened and she can no longer support her head properly. As well as that, we will meet with her orthotist to measure her up for her new trunk support suit. We have an overnight sleep study at the hospital, which is actually tonight, to look at her sleep apnea and to see whether her BiPAP is still giving her the oxygen she requires overnight, whether she needs additional oxygen support overnight or during the day. And then we have a follow-up appointment to discuss those results with her pulmonary specialist. We have fracture clinic, we have blood tests, we have x-rays, we have spinal clinic, we have nutritionist, we have speech pathologist, we have psychologist, we have the paediatrician, and we have the GP, the general practitioner, this month. And somewhere in there we need to keep up with her schoolwork. We need to organise her 5th birthday party, which several doctors never thought she'd live to see. We need to find time for socialising and fun and ordinary little girl stuff. And I have to keep on top of all of the billing, the paperwork, the appointments, the recommendations and the medical information for all of this. And I need to order her next month's supply of her Nutrini formula. And I'm fairly sure I've left stuff off of that list. And I will have to check my planner. And then there are other members of our family who have their own appointments and needs. My partner is having x-rays and a muscle biopsy, and his orthotics need mending. My son, who has autism spectrum disorder, has schoolwork and occupational therapy and hydrotherapy and psychologist and social stuff and sports. At some point I need to go grocery shopping and weed the garden and clean the house and try to convince myself that I'm not failing as a parent and as a human being. I need to stop putting off going to the doctor because I have had a croaky throat and a sore throat for over a month. So yeah, we need the extra support. Sometimes our money just doesn't stretch far enough. And we can't work a higher paying job because we need to be flexible with our hours and take what we can get because we need to be carers first. And we are very grateful that there are measures put in place to ensure that we live above the poverty line and that we get the funding we need. I really hope that the NDIS will become accepted the way Medicare is accepted, and I hope desperately that Medicare is protected and preserved, because universal public health care is honestly one of the few things our country has going for it right now. Supporting those in our community who have disabilities and complex medical needs, supporting neurodiversity and empowering those who are neurodivergent, that, in my opinion, is a really good thing. It it is the right thing to do, and it is the right thing for our country to do. And sometimes the process is time-consuming and frustrating, and it is as flawed as any other government system. There is a lot of paperwork, there are hoops to jump through, there is a whole technical language to learn, but we are grateful for it, and without it, we would be lost. And I'm happy to put up with it and go through it and work with it, because it means that we are able to use services that allow my children to participate with society in a way that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And then they can be members of society who contribute and who give back and who enrich our society. And without the NDIS, we would not be able to do that. And I guess that is why the National Disability Insurance Scheme and Medicare and the public hospital and public healthcare system in general is important to me. And that's why I've been so busy lately. So thank you for listening. Fingers crossed all of the funding goes through. We find out over the next week whether we get everything we need. And I will talk to you soon. Thank you for listening.